tell you something. All that glitters ain't gold. Hey, hey, it's been a long old troublesome road. And I'm looking for somebody come and help me carry this load. I need dollar, 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 that's what I need. Hey, hey, well, I need dollar, 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 that's what I need. Well, I don't know if I'm walking on solid ground.
Yes, we are here live in East Oakland, AXU 96.1 FM, baby. And I am the Black Cripple. Who's it?
Yeah, we the poverty scholars. That house's mama, that house's daughter. We the poverty scholars. All the people you don't want to see, never want to be. Look away from me. What you gonna do? Arrest me? We're in your city. Yeah, and we're here at KEXU. That's PNN, not CNN, people. On this liberated piece of LaShawn Ohlone land, in this beautiful occupied Turtle Island, constantly remaking and reclaiming this piece of Mama Earth.
And reflipping. Okay. So we got some guests coming on today, but I want to get into some gentrification report with
So actually, Evaye, I want to say prayers right now and take a moment of digital silence, physical silence, for a brother who was killed outside by, basically by being outside in these settler colonized cities like Huichin, with politricksters for mayors and politricksters for legislators, continuing to create new billion-dollar poverty pimp programs, quote unquote, to solve the homeless problem. Like we always say, we are your homeless problem. What? But prayers and love to this brother who was actually struck by a tree branch, mostly and completely because he was outside just trying to get some shelter, and transitioned yesterday because these cities have these policies, quote unquote, that do nothing to actually protect or care for unhoused and poor people on the street, but rather continue to profit off. So I wanted to start our gentrification report by that, because sometimes people talk about gentrification without talking about homelessness. Sometimes people talk about gentrification without talking about poverty. And sometimes people talk about gentrification without talking about politrickstering. And so in today's gentrification report, with love and prayer to all our brothers and sisters on these stolen streets dealing with this rain weather, all love and prayer, two bits of very important news. First of all, as we know that on this hour, this particular segment, we do our revolutionary lawyer without a degree outside of jail report. And as usual this week I got 3 calls. It always seems to be 3, 6, or 9 calls from folks facing unlawful evictions. And so I'm going to, like I do, use this moment to do a little teaching and a little lawyering for all the listeners and viewers struggling with these scam lords and developers. In this particular case, this was an elder living with their adult son. Both are disabled. And they shout out to Crip Hop, by the way, and also Poor Magazine for doing the work we do. But specifically, they're living multi-generationally in a HUD building that supposedly, quote unquote, as the cult of separation dictates in the so-called, project housing, said this was only elders only, and that the adult son had to leave. Well, first of all, this is a project-based Section 8. And although they do have these strict jailhouse-like rules, the reality is they can't evict that adult son without due process, number one. But number two, under ADA law, he's her attendant. And even though he is disabled, he is actually there as a attendant to his elder mother. And so what they tried to do, of course, was snake him with the paper. That way, I know they always do, us poor folks, thinking we didn't know better. But in his case, which I tell all listeners and viewers out there on the Revolutionary Legal Jailhouse Report, that all things begin and end in settler colonized land with a paper trail. They try to get us out with a paper trail, and like our next guest will be talking about, we can fight them with the paper trail. So I want to say that in this particular case, what we did is help him write a letter to the management, that we also CC'd the local, disability advocates, and what it DREAD is the one, right?
Yeah, shut up.
What's that stand for?
Shut up. Disability Education Defense Fund in Berkeley.
Right. So we CC'd them just to put them on notice so we know what's up. And lo and behold, the management found out, I didn't know that yeah, right. That part. Anyway, bottom line is they were checked in their BS. And we'll have more updates and advice as we always do. But if you have any questions, remember, please email poormag@gmail.com. That's why we're here. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a licensed therapist. But I am, in fact, a jailhouse lawyer without a degree outside of jail. And that leads me to my next beautiful part of Gentrification Report is our guest, Mr. Charles Pitts, Poor Magazine poverty scholar, artist, and activist, and his own jailhouse lawyer outside of jail without a degree, who has done a series of lawsuits against the system that continue to incarcerate every poor person they get, under the rubric of navigation center and billion-dollar solutions, which are never solutions because they're never listening to us as we speak from this space that we call homefulness, a homeless people's solution to homelessness. Charles, tell us what you got going.
Well, it starts, I don't even know where to start. It's just a big old bowl of spaghetti. But
maybe start with the navigation center.
all right.
Yeah. Whatever that is. First of all, tell listeners what a navigation center is.
Well, I'm gonna spare you the Nazi concentration camp thing, but basically they got a bunch of rooms, and they're big rooms, almost like a prison, like mobile homes. And they have these mobile home type things. They had about 15 of them, and they just bring homeless folks in there, and then they it's several things, because I feel like I just got in there. I luckily got in there, and then they just try to dump you somewhere. So if it was someone else, they would take them off the sidewalk, dump them in the navigation center, and from the navigation center, dump them into some other place. And I feel like the city and county of San Francisco tried to dump me in a crack house, and one of the city-sponsored crack houses, and I just, some levels it's safer to stay like on the sidewalk than these crack houses that the city funds, and they give a lot of evil people immunity to just run wild, assault and battery, urinating and defecating all over the place. I mean, it's like they're documented and just keep it moving. But the navigation center, they tell the public, like, oh, we're going to help those poor people get housing and help them with their issues. Note, eyeball roll.
For listeners, Charles is rolling his eye.
And I mean, when I was there, I really didn't see any of that. I tried to recommend it. I got nowhere. I put information out on tables that got like moved around. There was like San Francisco, you got needle exchanges and stuff like that. So what I was trying to do is I look up and there's a bunch of needles in the trash. So I brought some insulin boxes, some needle boxes, and they just weren't even receptive to that. And I just feel like, so, I have a few little issues or whatever, but it just seemed like they gave me a bunch of bus tokens and told me to go somewhere. So
So then, being the revolutionary, powerful poverty scholar that you are, you you launched a lawsuit.
well,
Tell us about that.
what happened is this guy threatens to screw my head off over the phone while I'm sleeping. So he's in the hospital. He leaves the hospital without leave, and they don't even know what to do. So they let him in, and he sleeps in a dorm that wasn't even his. He was separated from his partner. So he goes to where his partner is, and I'm in there with him. After being harassed for like maybe a month, well, maybe like 2 weeks from this person, the lady. So he comes in, and then I kind of flip out because he's not supposed to be where he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be at UC. He's supposed to be at the hospital because he has a respiratory disease. So he leaves the hospital without leave, comes to the navigation center. So I flip out because I'm just on my side of the room yelling at him because he, like, really, somebody who threatens to kill me gets like free reign throughout the whole navigation center, just come wherever he wants. And so there's a fight that ensues. Then well, I mean, it's sort of like, he kicks me a couple of times and I block, and I kick a couple of things around. He's trying to keep some distance. But then the staff come in, and then looking at the different reports, I am still trying to figure out what happened. I mean, I was there, I'm looking at the different reports, and I'm from their reports, I don't know what happened.
Right.
So the police officer says one thing, which is hearsay, and I'll probably try to refute that in court, and then the other staff. So they, one says I punched the lady, the other one says I shoved her, etc., etc. But in the middle of a fight, no one should come in the middle of a fight flailing your arms around. And she's supposed to de-escalate a fight by getting in the middle and flailing her arms. I mean, and it goes against her very training.
Right.
The shelter training manual, I think it's like 7.1, and there's another part where if clients, you aren't supposed to like try to, if a client is in fear or something like that, you're supposed to keep like 7 or more feet away. So it's like, most people's arms are probably like, I'm gonna guess like 4 or 5 feet at most. But this lady, she jumps right in, like, I don't know. I mean, her white frigidity is gonna sell her. I mean, like, what the hell? Her white frigidity is gonna, oh, I told that black guy to stop, and he just stopped. No, I'm under attack, and I'm gonna block you at least, and that's what happened. So I block her. Now she flips out like, oh, I've been hit. My white frigidity won't save me. So I mean, she didn't say that, but of course,
I get it.
yeah. So it's like, the guy wasn't supposed to be there. He, she violated her training, and then it gets even worse because he like, remember, when you look at the court system, what happened really doesn't even matter. So it's like all of the processes, once it gets to the court, it's all process. And just a slight step back, it's just like their process regarding handling all of that situation, it violated several things. I think it violated the standards of care. The San Francisco Administrative Code 2400, it talks about the standards of care and how shelter systems are supposed to, like, what you're supposed to have. Right. Like incontinence things,
De-escalation.
I'm unsure. I'll double check.
Or I would say trauma response. That I know is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm.
Doesn't sound like they knew what they were doing.
I just feel like they hire like whoever they can get, and the sidebar to all of this is the hiring standards. I've asked many times as to what documentation does the city and county of San Francisco and the service providers have that would say a female shelter cannot hire a rapist. I mean, it's facetious and but okay, they get it wrong. You get it wrong. Okay, all right. They should be like, we have a written policy that says at our female shelters we do not hire rapists. But they don't even have a policy like that. So they just hire whoever they want. You know, some felons are good, some need to be back in prison. So, and it's like I feel like we get some of the most meanest people to come work at these service providers, and they don't follow their policies. There's several problems because you're supposed to have a like a hearing or something, like a grievance policy. They don't have a grievance policy. The navigation center, they kept saying,
"We're a pilot program. We're a pilot program."
Yeah, they did.
oh, but
It's lasted for almost 7 years.
okay, but the thing is when you look at their contract, the standards of care is hardwired into their contract.
Yeah.
So it talks about, you know, the escalation.
Wraparound care and all that. I know.
So
Well, okay, so just if people's eyes are like going with the back of their head with all this, it's understandable, because it's really complicated when these billion-dollar contracts go out to quote-unquote solve us homeless people's problems, or more importantly, solve the homeless problem. It's important to bring this up because people never think or talk through the politrickster programs that these giant billion-dollar politricksters come up with. Navigation centers are being promoted in Berkeley, they're being promoted in Oakland, and they're being promoted in Frisco like they're candy. That is their solution to everything. And under, Mayor Breed, I don't know if we have that up, but if we could bring that picture up, but, her solution, which we're going to be talking about on Tuesday and doing an action about next Wednesday, is actually to take unhoused people's tents. That's her answer to the homeless problem. And in fact, our research team has been collecting data since October 24th, and it's up to 410 tents. And we're just a small group of people who've spoken to about 200 people. So that's it. Imagine all the other unhoused people whose tents are being stolen as a way to, quote, get rid or destroy our lives as houseless people.
Let me throw it in there.
Yeah.
See, part of the problem is that we feed in way too much what the oppressor tells us. We feed way too much into it, and it's like we need to start critically thinking, and we need to start challenging what people tell us.
That's right.
Because anybody in this room tells me something and it don't sound right to me, I'm gonna start looking and researching and trying to figure it out myself. But the situation is that the police pull up and they're confiscating it as evidence, and basically from there, they, who knows what happens to your tent. But see, now I've recorded one on YouTube. It's on YouTube, and I posted it on YouTube. And what it is they took the lady's tent. Okay, the DPW and the police were there. They laughing and joking, and the police officers in the back corner somewhere swinging around. And yeah, they laughing and they taking these people's this lady's stuff, and she's severely traumatized by it. and they're gonna force her to sign. They're gonna force her under the threat of arrest to sign a ticket. But to me, the situation is they're supposed to bag and tag everything so that they can come and retrieve their property.
That's right.
They weren't bagging tagging anything.
No,
I
they
don't
weren't.
think.
No, they weren't.
And so,
At all.
yeah, so it's at some point, to me, it's a theft because they've separated this person from their property in a fashion where they can't retrieve it.
Exactly.
And
That's,
so,
that's illegal.
well,
But it's not.
oh, see,
They get away with it.
I mean, see, is this a laugh or is this a cackle?
There you go.
Because see, at some point, there is a few laws that would be like, I witnessed this and now I'm victimized by what happened. So it's in the back of my head in that I seen this, I was traumatized myself, and then they started to try to aggravate me, and the officer refused to give his badge number. I think he refused to give a CAD number. So this officer's coming out, taking this lady's stuff, and he refuses to identify himself, and he refuses to provide any information that would connect him to the situation.
Exactly.
So what happens next is I go to the police accountability board and I file my complaint. So I have more lawsuits than an epileptic can shake himself at.
And on that note, we have to move on because we have another guest. But I want to say, if you want to know more about the powerful work of Charles, stay tuned. Also, for those of you watching and listening, we do a thing called People Schools, Theater of the Poor. And myself and Charles, who are longtime collaborators, will be putting on a production called Trying to Take a Shower in a Shelter. So but hold that thought. 1 second. Oh, go ahead, say it.
See, the other part of it is like, if you go to the San Francisco Superior Court website,
Yeah.
you can put my name in, Charles Pitts, but put the last name in and then look for the first name. Then you can see my court cases.
Pitts.
Yeah, and
And we'll be doing a story on this one as well. So, Charles, this is not the last time we will see him, probably see him next week. But I do want to transition out. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to Junebug, to Teresa, to Memphis, to all the poverty scholars in the occupied village of Yalamu, Frisco, and the listeners to come out to front of City Hall next week at 5 o'clock, because we're doing it then on Wednesday, January 23rd, because we will be going into the Police Commission after the press conference to speak back, because what Charles said is these police officers are doing these seizures with no noticing and no proper procedures. So we're going to sign out. Charles, any last words before we sign out?
I just say two things. When you're dealing with the law, you document everything and then start hitting your law libraries and then learn your processes and procedures. Those are going to be the main things, and then also just get some help as you're studying that. So it just, you gotta put work in so that you can defend yourself and go at it, because there's no get rich quick or shortcut to the revolution. You can't go to Walmart and buy the revolution.
On that note, you can't buy the revolution at Walmart.
Jeremy and his wife were having a little situation, so Jeremy Miller, so I want you to keep your thoughts and minds and prayers with Jeremy and his wife. And So
Thank you. So we're going to take a short music break, and then we're going to deal with the First Nations struggle in the occupied land that the colonizers called Canada, of First Nations folks to make sure to save Mother Earth from more of these oil extractive industries with the beautiful Molly Jane. So from the mothership over there, we're not going off the air, just probably a 30-second music break. See you in a second.
We are back. KEXU 96.1 FM, East Oakland. And we have another guest. Take it away.
All right, I'm going to actually have this powerful warrior for Mama Earth speak on what they've been doing. There's some extremely powerful First Nations leaders who are trying to save Mama Earth from more of these extractive industries, where we see Mother Earth's resources as a commodity. But as we all know, you can't buy and sell Mama Earth. So, Molly Jane, welcome to Poor People's Revolutionary Radio and TV.
All right, thank you. I want to give thanks to my teachers here, Poverty Scholars, Tiny and Leroy, for elevating this issue and giving me a chance to speak. So Tiny, you're right. The land's colonially known as Canada, the north side of Turtle Island. There's a struggle happening there. I think that to relate it to an American audience, you could understand it in the terms of Standing Rock might be like a reference point for folks here to understand what's going on. So basically, this nation is called the Wet'suwet'en Nation, and the clan that's enacted, they're taking back their ancestral lands from colonization. They're unceded, which that means they've never lost their land in a treaty or a war. And so all of this context of what's happening is illegal, even in the eyes of Canada. So backing it up a little bit, there's several mega infrastructure projects in oil and gas industries that have been trying to encroach on this land, which is in northern BC, near Alaska, and trying to take these pipelines through their unceded territories to deliver fracking gas, which they call natural gas, but we know that it's unnatural process of hydraulic fracturing, to bring this through their lands, to ship it out for export markets. And this is, geopolitically, this is something that, NAFTA or whatever the incarnation of it is called nowadays, the blood is also on the U.S. hands, so we can't, forget about that and forget that it's all connected. So about 10 years ago, just to give a little backstory, these folks decided to reoccupy their ancestral lands and build space for healing. These folks have been colonized, brutalized, had their languages, culture, tradition, everything taken from them, and they're trying to take it back. And so the main focus is healing the people, healing the land, and they're literally standing in the way of these pipeline projects by reoccupying their territory, not on a reservation, but on the land itself. You mentioned, with gentrification, the unlawful eviction of people, and that's exactly what's happening here. There's a similar thing happening here. They've successfully fought these giant billion-dollar projects for about 10 years, just by living in the way, and also with a legal precedent. The Supreme Court of Canada in 1997 had a case called Delgamuukw, and it was a case that basically proved that the Wet'suwet'en did not give up their rights and title to this land. It's about 22,000 square kilometers of land. Recently there was a temporary injunction granted to Coastal GasLink to start their surveying projects on their land, to bring in survey crews, man camps, stuff like that onto their land. And there's 5 clans within the Wet'suwet'en. Unistoten is one of them, and I'll give y'all spellings for this at the end. All 5 of them have unanimously rejected the pipeline projects. They have to do consultation, and when they've done this consultation, they use a lot of sort of sneaky ass ways to try and push it through. They'll go to a certain elected Bandon council instead of the hereditary leadership, for example, and other divide and conquer strategies. And so all 5 of the hereditary leaders have said no to this pipeline. So one of the things that they say up there is, consultation is not consent. Consent is a big piece of this entire thing. They've never consented to this encroachment on their land. They never consented to these projects. And so CGL, Coastal GasLink, was able to get this temporary injunction and have it enforced by the RCMP, which is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is federal police. So these folks are just fulfilling their ancestors' promises to protect the land. They also have people out there in a healing center that they founded a few years ago to heal from addiction, to heal from colonial violence, to heal from depression, things like that. And there were patients at the healing center when the RCMP came in on December 7th with a tactical assault unit, heavy machinery. There's lots of videos online, y'all can check that out, against unarmed women. And yeah, so there's a lot to it. I mean, part of it is that paper trail you mentioned earlier, Tiny, around, trying to catch people in a colonial sort of frame of their laws and of these kind of things. And they can always sort of move the goalposts once you finally did raise it and got that Supreme Court case. Oh, well, now we're going to turn it over and do something else and go against our own precedent and just deal with the ramifications of it later. Shoot first, ask questions later. And what they're counting on is for this to happen in silence and in darkness. They're counting on these folks being there isolated and not having like the world's eyes on them. So that's kind of what our role is going to be like coming into it, is to just shine a light on what's happening. So December 7th, there were 14 arrests. There was brutal violence on unarmed people. These folks, this was a neighboring nation, Gidimt'en clan, that erected a secondary barrier on the one road that leads into the territory. And so in the following days, the chiefs decided to not stand down in any way, but to take down a gate to facilitate folks being safe at the Unistoten camp from having that RCMP violence come on them. And so one of the main things that they're trying to get out to the world right now is force is not consent. They've not given up. The Unistoten have never said yes to pipelines. They still don't. That pipeline's not going to go through. Also, they're trying to set up, man camps out there, which there's a big problem with missing and murdered Indigenous women. This is supposed to be a place of healing. So basically, they're kind of perpetuating this issue of that kind of violence. So I don't know how much time I have here.
Probably like 5 more minutes.
All right, right on.
Then before you do, I just want to
Sure.
say you're listening and watching PNN, not CNN. This Poor People's Revolutionary Radio on this occupied territory settlers called Oakland. And we're talking to Molly Jane, who's actually talking about the liberation movement of our sisters and brothers in the settler colonizer territory. The settlers call Canada.
Thanks, Tim. So the main points here are that the Wet'suwet'en have not consented to any work being done by Coastal GasLink on their territories. They were violently forced to open their gates to the work crews. The work that's taking place now is pre-construction. There's about 3 years of pipeline construction work ahead, so this project will not go through. The investors are going to be wasting their money because this is unlawful. Even on an international scale, they're asking folks to, pay attention and throw down in solidarity. They attacked whenever one of the head chiefs was in mourning over his mother passing, and this is a pattern that's used by these colonial forces and oil and gas industry. They know how to get to the heart of somebody whenever you can't stand up when you're in mourning. That's the Wet'suwet'en law. They're aware of this stuff, so this is part of the manipulation tactics. So there's also, just one more point on this, is that, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which is shortened as UNDRIP, is being broken in an international way. This could be considered a war crime on behalf of Canada against these folks. They have no jurisdiction on Wet'suwet'en land, not even by their own laws. And so this interim injunction and a militarized raid happened before the defendants even had a chance to respond in court. So that's the broad strokes. To learn more, you can visit their website and their Facebook. Right now they're kind of, they're mired in this legal battle, and they have to fight through the colonial system to reassert their title. So they're really trying to get that, but it's already up to 200 grand, something like that, the last time I checked, which just shows how much the international community is relating to this and it's not, standing down from it. So we can put a link probably in the description of the video or something with the right spelling and everything, but the website is unistoten.camp, unistoten.camp.
Let him find it.
unistoten.camp. And on the site, you'll see resources on how to donate, background to the campaign, just information about where it's at right now. It's regularly updated. Also, it has different ways for people to support, either locally or from afar. And
Let me just ask you, and I don't know, Leroy, if you had a question, but I did want to say for listeners and viewers, everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people knew about Standing Rock. Poor Magazine actually had the blessing of going at the very end when there were literally 40 below, which I personally almost died because that was colder than any human, but that's the badassness of those warriors and all of us, myself, Auntie Frances, and Tibu, and Acela. But what was most terrifying to me at that moment in that beautiful indigenous territory was that these corporate gangsters literally had scopes on us. We were at the end of several guns pointed and ready to shoot and kill, right? And kill human beings, first peoples of that land, over this commodity that they decided was more important than human beings, right? That they decided they owned that part of Mama Earth. And the other very bizarre part of that is that that they were there as a private army. We don't have, none of us is ignorant to the ways of the Americlan politrickster presidents and how they're just one giant corporation. Dick Cheney people and the George Bush people and all those types, and Halliburton and Blackwater. But that's who that was. And all that to say, the indigenous resistance was powerful. It was prayerful. And a lot of times we talk about the enemy as though they're going to win. But I love what you said, Molly Jane, about we're going to win. Win, and not in some capitalist notion of I'm going to win the race, but more in that those folks have never given up and they're not going to start now, right? But I just wanted you to say a little bit about, people think about Canada as though it's this sort of beatific, wonderful place where they have health care and some other things. And I know that there's that whole thing about the president sort of being down and having a person in office who's an indigenous woman. And so I'm so, not confused by this, but I'd like you to speak on that a little.
mean, yeah, just a little bit around that. They have this 150 years sort of reconciliation project that's happening right now with their super good looking, prime minister, their version of the president, Trudeau. But let's not forget, his father was also a prime minister who wrote the White Papers, which was basically this sort of, let's call it Jim Crow for Canadian Indigenous folks, So you can say one thing and do another. And I think that we've seen that with all politicians that are in the pocket. It doesn't matter what party you're in. It really matters, what's happening on the ground, like who's paying for this. A lot of these same shareholders for oil and gas industry in Canada, like I said, or in the States too. Dakota Access directly related to some of these same shareholders. So it's kind of, following where the money is coming from and not listening to that, to the words that are being said, because action speaks louder than words.
I don't know. I just want to make sure people know the website again. That's as we heard from Molly Jane.
I can't go back and forth.
It's Uniston, and if you could spell it one more time just for listeners.
Yeah, it's unistoten.camp, unistoten.camp.
All right. We'll be on this issue. Thank you, Molly Jane, for your wonderfulness. And let me turn it back over to my brother Leroy.
Yes, I just wanted to say a little bit tonight. We're going to talk about it more in the coming weeks, coming months. But we really have to really look and stay focused on how local Bay Area politicians redefine themselves once they climb that ladder. Now we have Gavin Newsom as governor, and he's trying to clean himself from Karen Cash. We have to stay on him. And also, Kamala Harris, she just announced that she's running for president. But we all know in the Bay Area, when she was here as the top cop, didn't do nothing around police brutality. So we had to keep their feet to the fire. Matter of fact, she just came out a couple of days ago, popping her college because she voted with all the Democrats to have an anti-lynching bill. Now, I'm not saying that, we should not have that. Yeah, lynching still happens. But when she was the top cop in San Francisco, she didn't, really look at police as lynching. So we really have to stay on them. I've seen it this whole month and the whole last month. They're cleaning themselves from the past. Gavin Newsom came out, I think it was a couple nights ago, saying, "Oh yeah, Karen Cash was a mistake." So we really have to stay in their face. And I know we'll talk about that more in the coming weeks, but I just want to leave you with that.
Yeah, and Leroy, first of all, I want to shout out A. Hicks, powerful poverty scholar, who literally, while in the shelter system, just like myself and Charles and Joe and many of us, whether we be in their, politrickster shelters or on the street, but in her case, fought the Karen Cash with poverty journalism while she was in the shelter. We went out on the street every day, you, me, many of us are poor, and protested and continue to not give up and say that so again, backing up, if people don't know what Karen Cash is, probably you don't. If you haven't lived on health fare and EBT in the Bay Area, you don't necessarily know. What it was, what it is, what it continues to be, is another way to steal poor people's money. Straight up. What they did is they decided, first of all, because he came in office, literally on the backs, I'm going to solve the homeless problem. God, I've heard that a few times, right? Right. We're going to solve the homeless problem.
Angelos.
Right, and exactly. Alioto, all them, right? Jordan. But interestingly enough, in his case, the minute he got in, he made a move. And his move was, oh yeah, I'm going to take all people's welfare away from them and give it to shelters. And then you'll pay for your shelter bed. It was the biggest scam and continues to be, and basically is another way, like the conservatorship program that we're about to launch a big fight on today, to steal poor people's money. It's just interesting to me, though, the gangsterism that happens with these, white collar or, politrickster callers against poor people. I mean, it's straight up theft and gangsterism. But it's never checked. It's unchecked.
Yeah. And they get to remake themselves. That's the problem.
Exactly.
I mean, Kamala Harris should never say that she's going to run president on Martin Luther King Day.
Right.
You're not Martin Luther King, you know? And like I said, when she was in the Bay Area, she protected cops 24/7. So we really have to push her feet to the fire.
That's real.
Because a lot of black activists are going for her. So we need to stop that.
It's, sadly, it's like the mayor of Frisco, right? Sadly, melanin is not equity, folks. Even though I think sometimes people think it is. Anyway, to quote my sister Juma, brown faces in high places don't necessarily mean justice. And so that about it does it for us, Poor People's Revolutionary Radio. As most of you listeners and viewers know, this is just the beginning of a powerful night of media. So stay tuned. We're going to take a short music break and sign off and then come back on in about 7 minutes for
Hip Hop Nation.
shout out to Mutiamo Silencio at the soundboard. We love you, Brad.